Welcome to Music Theory, Skills in Action with Dr. Gordon Mason. This class is brought to you by the faculty of Saint Andrews Conservatory in Sanford, Florida. For more information and to sign up for classes and lessons, go to standrewsconservatory.org. Also brought to you by the Florida Parent Educator Association Scholarship Foundation and Sacred Music Florida. We now join the class that is already in session.
This is Dr. Mason. He's joining us today from St. Andrews Conservatory in Sanford, Florida, just a little bit north of Orlando. Some of you all, I think a lot of you are fairly nearby there. So Dr. Mason is a teacher, he's a conductor, he's a clinician, and he has served as the associate conductor of the Bob Jones University Symphony Orchestra. He was also the director of choral ensembles at Bob Jones Academy in Greenville, South Carolina for 12 years, and he was their department chair for 11 years. And he's currently teaching at St. Andrews Conservatory. He is a wealth of knowledge, and I know that you all are going to learn so much today. And of you, this will be reviews for some of it, and you're going to learn some new things. So probably a lot of new things today. And just so you know, and if your parents are listening in, or if you would like to pass this on, and I sent to you as well, Dr. Mason has an in-person theory class as well. And I have an email address, or you could contact me, and we will put you in touch so that you can go to his class that expands and goes quite a bit further than where we're going today. And it's held at St. Andrews Conservatory in Sanford. So anyway, Dr. Mason, take it away. We look forward to learning with you today.
Very good. Well, thank you, Ms. DeMarco. And I'm just really excited to be here with you all today. I know you are young musicians, and that's exciting to me because I began my musical career about your age, maybe a little bit earlier than that. And my mom was my piano teacher. So I had a good instructor right from the beginning. And we always had music in our home, and we would sing together as a family. And it's become an important part of my being able to express who I am, just by playing music, or especially conducting music. That's been really, really fun for me. And I've gotten to know a lot of people. I've gotten to know a lot about composers and the history of music through that journey. And I hope to be able to maybe help you a little bit along the way with just this very brief time we have today, and maybe inspire you to continue on and be even better than you already are. So it's nice to see you, and I'm going to begin with just a very brief story about something that has been really important to me in life, not just music. When I was about your age, 7th grade, I was in a science class with Mr. Bruning, and Mr. Bruning had a very unusual way of teaching, but it's lasted my whole lifetime, the influence that he had on me. So having good teachers is very important. But what he did was he taught us to ask the whatness of things. So when we talked about various science terms, he would always ask us, well, what do you mean by that? Or how do you define that term? And so I began to go deeper into the meaning of words. So I really understood what whoever wrote the book was actually meaning. And that's one of the things I hope to do for you today, is help you ask questions about music. And so really, this isn't just about music theory today. I'm going to talk about music theory and how music is put together, but it's really about being musicians and enjoying music and using music to express something that God has put into our soul. I believe God is a God of order, and he certainly is a creative God. And you can tell from creation what that's all about. You know, he created the world in 6 days, and then he rested. So there was order in creation. And then there was beauty in creation also, all over the place. And we see it today, every day, if we just learn to look for it. There's beauty in each other. and then there's beauty in nature around us. There's beauty in worshiping God. There's just so many things that are positive when you have a way to express it. And I've chosen music to help me do that. And I hope you continue to do that through the rest of your life, whether you become a full-time professional musician or just do it as a hobby to enjoy. It's something that can last a lifetime. So having said that, I have a definition for music. And this may not be the perfect definition of music, but it's my definition. It's what means a lot to me. And I thought I would just share it with you today. You may have a different definition, but my definition of music is an orderly group of sounds that create beauty or tell a story or both. Let me read that once again. Music is an orderly group of sounds that create beauty or tell a story or both. So I started talking about order in God's creation. I think God is a God of order, and we see that every day, all around us. And so part of music theory is bringing order to music, to know how the sounds originate, to know how they relate to each other, to know that there are instrumental sounds and vocal sounds, all that can be used to express ourselves and to create beauty also. So my job as a teacher, I feel, is to help you create order in music and maybe even be able to write some music at some point in your future. If you've written any music at all that's original, could you just raise your hand or wave at me? Anybody done that yet? Okay, I see, there we go. Kara, is that you? Okay, I see Kara, and I see Kalina, and I see Sylvia. This is fantastic. I was hoping that I would see that. So maybe I can help you understand some of the tools that we use to write music and compose music and see how it's all put together. Because the more order and the more beauty, I think the more satisfying it is for you. And it's certainly the more satisfying for people who would like to listen to your music too. So let's ask ourselves, what are we going to learn today? We're going to learn several things. We're going to learn how music is put together, the tools of music, so to speak. We're going to learn some terminology that maybe you already know, but hopefully I'll be able to bring up some terms that you don't know, and we can learn that also. And then before we're done, I'm going to actually try and help you learn how to write a simple melody. Now, today we have 30 minutes, and so that's a lot to do in 30 minutes. But I am going to be teaching some courses later on the advanced and intermediate level that will help to understand the basics of what I've given you today. So maybe you might be interested in doing that in the future. So let's talk about how music is put together, or how it's what we call composed. Well, there are various elements that are put together, and I'd like you to think of it from the standpoint of a military structure, meaning in any military operation, you have a commander-in-chief, one person who's in charge, right? So the commander-in-chief for our country is the President of the United States. He's the one who literally makes the final decisions about what our Defense Department does. So in a musical context, let's say the composer is the commander-in-chief. He or she gets to make the decisions about what the music sounds like, what it looks like, what instruments are being used, or voices. So there's that aspect of it. And I'm going to say that a commander-in-chief doesn't do all the work. He has generals that do his bidding. So he may have a lot of different generals in different parts of the country who carry out his orders. Well, I'm going to introduce you to some generals today, okay? So we have General Clefsine. Here's one of them right here. I see people nodding their heads, so we know that this is a treble clef, General treble clef, okay? Another general is General Key Signature. This is a key signature. It has a treble clef and a bass clef. and 1 sharp. So 1 sharp would put us in a very particular scale or key. And who knows what key that would be? Can anybody talk to me? Kara?
G major.
That would be the key of G major. Now, let's ask the whatness question. What does the key of G major mean? Well, it means all of the white notes from G to G with one exception, and that's the one that's given right here, and you play a black key, F sharp. So if we were composing in the key of G, we would primarily use those notes in the G scale. And I'm going to come back to that a little bit later. Our next general is general time signature. This is a pretty common time signature. It's 4/4, 4 beats to the measure, and the quarter note, that's 1 beat. So that general has to do with the rhythmic aspect of music. Here's another general. This is general tempo marking. You've all seen the word allegro, and this has to do with the speed. So general tempo tells the soldiers how fast to go or how slow to go, depending on what the needs are. So we have a number of other generals, but those are the ones that are probably the most important and that have the greatest influence on the music that we perform or the music that we write. So those are some of the terms and some of the tools, so to speak, in the toolbox about music theory and how we write or compose music. So in addition to the generals, we also have other terminology that help us know what to do. And of course, that you learn, some of it I'm sure you've already learned. You've learned different tempo markings, and you've learned about staccato, the length of the note, or tenuto, which would be a longer note. So the better you know your tools in your toolbox, the more you understand what the composer intends. Because usually good music is well marked with markings that indicate the composer's intent. Now, if you listen to one musician record a piece of music, and you listen to the same piece by another person, they're going to have differences because people feel differently about maybe what those notes mean or what those terms mean. So there may be slight differences, but generally, those terms help us to understand the composer's intentions. So terminology is extremely important. Let's talk a little bit about melody, rhythm, and harmony. These are 3 categories or aspects of music that help us to understand the building blocks and how to put those tools together. So let's start with melody. Melody, I'm sure you know, is usually the top voice. If it's a choir or a choral piece, it's probably the melody is going to be in the soprano up above all the other voices, the bass voice being the lowest. So melody has a certain range. And usually in most music that you and I would perform, it's about an octave. So let's say you were going to write a melody, and let's say we were going to put it in the key of C. No sharps, no flats, and our starting note is middle C. So that melody might go up and down within that octave, but maybe not a lot higher than the 3rd space C above it, because that would make it very easy to sing. It would make it very easy to play on the piano, even with one hand. So that's another characteristic of melody, is the range of the melody. How high it goes, how low it goes. Also, our melody could be what we call diatonic. Does anybody know what the term diatonic means? Do I see any hands? Okay, well, I see one hand, Mrs. DeMarco knows. Well, diatonic means that you stay within the notes that are in a particular scale. Rather than using chromatic notes that would be outside of the key, you stay within the key itself. So in the key of C, you would use C, D, E, F, G, A, B, and back to C again in a limited range. And after a while, you'd say, I'm really bored with this melody. I would like to use other notes. And so that's when we introduced chromatic notes to give us more options and make the music sound differently. So we have range, we have diatonic, and then another thing that's very characteristic about just a fairly simple melody is it many times starts on the first note of the scale and ends on the first note of the scale. So that's not always true. In fact, I'm going to play a melody here for you in just a few minutes where the melody starts on the 5th degree of the scale. We have names for the scale degrees. The first degree of the scale is called the tonic, T-O-N-I-C. The 5th degree of the scale is called the dominant. And those are the two primary starting points for most melodies. The first degree of the scale, the tonic, or the 5th degree of the scale, the dominant. And then when the melody ends, it's very common that it ends on the same note it started on, like the tonic note. So the piece I'm going to play for you actually starts on the dominant. It starts on a G, and it ends on a C. So as you're thinking about, okay, what am I going to do with this melody? Think about those three things. Make it within the scale to start with, and then make it in a range that's easy to sing or easy to play. And then have a starting point and an ending point that sounds final. And your tonic note is usually the best place to do that. There's one other thing about melody that I wanted to mention that to you, and that's that melodies tend to come in phrases. So by phrases, I mean a group of measures. 4 measures or 8 measures is very common for just like even a hymn type of melody. Da 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 da. That's 4 measures, but it's only the first half of the melody. Da 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 da. And then we go back to the first section. Da 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 da. Now I've just done a melody that has 5 notes in it, but I have a beginning section, I have a middle section, and then I have a last section that sounds like the beginning, so it sounds familiar. We call that ABA. That's the form of the piece, is a 3-part form with the 2 A sections matching in a B section that sounds different. So there's another aspect of music that we need to pay attention to, is how it's put together as far as a form is concerned. I have students that like to write music, and they get ideas, and they'll write 20 measures of something, and then they'll get another brilliant idea, and they'll write 20 more measures of something. But by the time you get through about 6 sections that are all different from each other, you want to hear something familiar. So that's why a form is important. AB or ABA. And there's many different other forms which I'll be teaching in the other courses also. So there's some ideas about melody to get you started. Now let's talk about rhythm a minute. That's the second big area of music. Rhythm, of course, is, it's sometimes described as the math of music because it involves numbers of beats and subdivisions of beats and so on. But rhythm gives liveliness and variety to melody or to music. So we have lots of different note values that help us create original types of sounds. You know, you don't have to stick with just half notes and whole notes and quarter notes. We have subdivisions of the quarter notes for 8th notes and 16th notes. And we have ways to use those like syncopation. How many know what I mean by syncopation? Raise your hand. Okay, a few of you know about syncopation. So that's playing with the longer notes in the measure, but instead of putting them on the beat, you put them in between beats or on what we call an off beat. Da 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 da. That would be syncopation as far as the rhythmic aspect of the music. Excuse me, I'm going to grab a drink of water here. Oh, let me stop just a second. And Mrs. DeMarco, do we have questions yet?
Yes, like in West Side Story, someone just mentioned. Yes, as a matter of fact, the syncopation, exactly. It's not just not just something that not just a regular basic beat. Da 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 da. Like it is Syncopation.
Yes.
Did I get that right? Yeah, syncopate. I'll write it on here so you can see it. So yeah, but
So,
I have a question when you get further down the road, but yeah.
okay. Yeah, that's a very good illustration. Whoever talked about West Side Story, Leonard Bernstein, the composer and conductor of the New York Philharmonic when he was alive, wrote the music for West Side Story way back. I don't know if it was in the 60s, maybe 1960s or so. And he used a lot of syncopation because the story is about gang warfare. And sometimes they were running all over the place. But one of the melodies is da 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 ba 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 ba. Very syncopated. And it makes what would be normally kind of a simple melody much more interesting, which was describing what was going on in the story. It was really cool when that happens. The last category I want to talk about after melody, harmony, or excuse me, melody rhythm is harmony. Harmony may be the most challenging to understand because it involves groups of notes now, not just individual notes. So when we talk about groups of notes, we're talking about usually triads, which is a 3-note chord. So a triad on the first degree of the scale is called a tonic triad, C, E, G. Easy enough. It's a 1 chord. And then the other 2 triads that are most commonly used to harmonize melodies would be the dominant triad, built on the 5th degree of the scale. That's a dominant triad, G, B, D. And what we call the subdominant triad, built on 4 of the scale, F, A, C. So that gives us 3 chords to use with our melody. And there's lots of other chords, but the chords that you're going to hear in the melody that I'm just about to play are those very chords. You're going to hear the tonic chord, the subdominant chord, and the dominant chord all in this melody. So maybe I'll go ahead and do that right now. This is a kind of a familiar melody, and it's played by a Suzuki violinist. Is anybody taking Suzuki violin? No?
You want?
Okay, maybe there are people that I can't see. But I have a little recording here of a familiar melody. This melody starts with a pickup note. So it's in 4/4, but the first note you hear will be the 4th beat going to the downbeat of the next measure. So let's take a listen. Okay, I'm back. I'm going to move over to the piano just a second, and I hope you can see me and hear me. Is DeMarco, am I on okay? Yes? Okay.
Yes.
Now, if we identified the chords that go with those notes, we would have 1, 1, 5, 1. Then the melody melody repeats that same 4 measures with the same chord structure. But then the melody changes to something else, and we hear that's the 4 chord, that's the 5 chord, and back to the 1 chord later. So by using those 3 familiar chords, we can harmonize a simple melody. And then as you mature as a composer, there are, of course, other chords that you can use to substitute to those for greater variety. But those are the 3 main ones. One other thing that you heard that maybe you didn't recognize is cadence points. A cadence is either a temporary stop to the melody or a full stop to the melody. For example, da 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 da. There was a little bit of a stop to the melody where there was a long note, and then the melody started again. Da 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 da. There was a stop there. Now those are temporary stops. But when we get to the last phrase of the melody, da 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 da, that's the final cadence, the final resting place where the music stops and you feel, I'm back to the beginning, everything is wonderful, and I can relax. So those cadence points and phrases are a very important part of harmonizing a melody. And usually, like I say, they come in 4s, 4, 8, 16 bars. Yes, we have a question?
A question for you, or just an observation. If everybody here has sung a hymn before, there are different kinds of cadences, right? When you sing Amen at the end of a hymn, that's a specific type of cadence, right? 4 chord to 1 chord, called a plagal cadence. They all have different names. But yeah, do you know when you sing, how many have sung hymns before and you sung Amen? Anybody? Yeah, all right. Yeah, so it's a type of cadence to end the piece, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
So a typical Amen cadence ends with the roots going 4, 1, da da. Excuse me, that's 5, 1, da 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 da. That would be a dominant to tonic cadence, 5 to 1, and it's called an authentic cadence. A 4, 1, like the Amen, da da, is called a plagal cadence, Plagal. So you more advanced students, hopefully you learned some terminology right there. Okay, any other questions before I finish up here? Okay, so we've talked about composing a melody, the parts that go into it, meaning melody, rhythm, harmony. We've talked about the generals with time signatures and clef signs and so on. And all those are parts of music that help us to analyze why it sounds like it does and how we could actually compose it ourselves. There's one other thing I wanted to talk about before we finish today, and that is just listening to music. Sometimes we hear, but we don't listen. We say, Dr. Mason, what does that mean? Isn't hearing and listening the same thing? No, it's not the same thing. And let me give you a little test right now. Looks like you're all seated in a fairly quiet room. So I'm going to stop talking for 15 seconds. And I would like you to listen very carefully to every sound you hear during that 15 seconds. Would you do that? Starting now. Okay, that's 15 seconds. What sounds did you hear? Who can identify at least one sound? Is that Joshua? Am I saying that
Yes,
right?
sir.
Is that you?
Yes, sir. So the drone of our fan.
The drone of you have a ceiling fan?
Yes, sir.
Okay, that's a legitimate sound. Good. Kara?
The sound of my dad blasting music in his garage.
What is he doing?
blasting music in the garage.
Blasting music in his garage. Okay, that's a sound, kind of a far away sound. Let's have one.
Oh, so Sylvia says she hears her mom typing and her dog breathing.
Good.
And Camille says she hears her mom is talking downstairs.
Good. All right, cool.
Yeah.
So that's becoming very discriminating about the differentiating between sounds, and a composer must be able to do. So the better you listen, the more you'll learn, and the more you understand how music is put together. So the next time you're in church, maybe listen to something that's not obvious, like listen to the bass part that the organ is playing, or the piano is playing, or that a bass singer is singing. Maybe when an organ is playing, listen to the multitude of voices, because there are woodwind kind of voices, brass kind of voices. So my point is, your listening skills are extremely important to your development as a musician. Because as you play, how do you know what to fix about how you play or sing? You only know if you can hear something that's wrong and fix it. Now, if your teacher's there, of course, they probably are going to tell you what it is, but you're not always with your teacher. So if you learn to listen for minute details instead of just general sound, you'll be surprised how much that helps you as a performer.
You know, Dr. Mason, it just came to me as you were doing the 15 seconds of silence that, the composer, modern composer, not alive still, but named John Cage, wrote a piece called 4 minutes and 33 seconds. That's the name of his piece. And 4 minutes and 33 seconds has no notes. Okay, someone comes on the stage and they do absolutely nothing for 4 minutes and 33 seconds. And it's your job as an audience to hear whatever's going on in the hall, whatever's going on around you, just like we did for 15 seconds, only he wrote it and called it a piece.
Yeah, I know that. I can't say that I've heard that piece because there's nothing to hear.
Right?
But, it's interesting that you mentioned that, because the performance is actually the audience. Because after a while, the audience goes, they start to make weird sounds because there's nothing happening. And the performance is actually whatever the audience sounds are. So it's a really interesting twist. I'm glad you brought that up. Well, listen, that's about all I have time for today, although I'd love to talk more. And I've really enjoyed today. I can see there's genuine interest from your faces and your attentiveness. So Mrs. DeMarco, thank you for inviting me to do this.
Thank you. Thank you. And if you have time for just a couple of quick questions, if anyone has them, and anyone?
Sure. Kara.
Oh, yes, Kara. Oh, whoops. Do we hear you?
Yeah, I'm not hearing her.
Oh, there we go.
Okay. You compose music, correct?
Yes, not a lot of music, but I have composed some music and arranged it too.
Okay. Whenever you compose, do you ever do a certain thing to your music to let people know that it's your music? Like Sondheim, well, no, I should say Weber, because he does it a lot. He does like the bum 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 or whatever, ba ba ba. I can't hit that note. Bum bum ba 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 ba. Like every time he does any of his musicals. So do you do anything
Okay.
like that?
I think what you mean is there's some particular interval maybe that is identified with his music. Is that right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah. That's a very common thing for composers to do, and they've done that for hundreds of years. Actually, it started in opera because the composer would write a little melodic idea or formula that identified with one of the characters on the stage. And when that
Right.
particular character would appear, you'd hear that melody in the orchestra. But so yes, that is a very legitimate way of making the music sound like your own.
Okay.
There's
And
lots
that
of
would
ways to do that. Yeah.
right, and that idea that the singer has a melody that belongs to them and you hear it like he's saying was created by Richard Wagner, and it's called a leitmotif. Okay, and he was the first one to use that. And
Yeah, and that came from opera. He was a big
yes,
opera
from
composer.
opera, exactly. When that particular character came out, this was their theme. And does anyone else have a question? I suppose, not necessarily a question, but if anyone else has something, please. I would like to just share one thing, is that why all these things that Dr. Mason spoke about, the form, the melody, notes, ending on a tonic, beginning on this type of thing, the time signature, everything. And like he was saying, God is a God of order. Music is very orderly. It's, there's almost no end to the amount of patterns that you can find in music. But one thing you might be thinking in your mind is, why is this important that I follow all of this? Because a lot of music is expressing yourself, right? And what he talked about in the beginning. And, how can we, why if we have to express ourselves, do we have to keep this blah, 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 all these rules in a row? But I'll tell you a story really quickly. A friend of mine, very good friend of mine, is someone who's not a musician. She is actually was a senator and a representative, and she wanted to have a piece of music. She wanted to write a piece of music years ago, when in the days of Cassie Bernal, when there was this school shooting in Colorado, where this young Christian girl had passed away. And they said, and she wrote, my friend Janet ended up having a song written called "Yes, I Believe in God." And it was performed by Rebecca St. James. She came to me to say to me, "Allison, I have an idea for a song. I want you to listen to this and see what it sounds like." And I thought, oh my goodness, here she is. Let's find this out. What is this? So I go to her office and she plays for me a melody on a phone that has piano keys. And I looked at her and I said, "Janet, it's not, and we talked for quite a while. And her problem is that she didn't understand, why does it need to have the same number of beats in every measure? Why does it have to be like this? And why does it have to be like that? I don't necessarily want to keep these rules. I like this. And so the back and forth became, it's these rules and these forms and these and the things that Dr. Mason is telling you is for the benefit also of the listener. Because if something is very awkward sounding and there's not the same number of beats in a measure, or you start on the flat 4 or you start on whatever, it's not going to be something that's going to be relatable to that listener. And if your idea of composing and you're writing something to convey an emotion or to convey something to a listener, it's going to be very difficult for them to listen to. So, I just, she ended up submitting it to Rebecca St. James, who reworked it a lot.
Yeah.
And turned it into something that became a really popular song at the time. So, but all that to say that these things are important, because the structure, and the music can, like you're saying, Sylvia, music can also manipulate your emotions. That's why a lot of composers write. That's why in service and in church, using our emotions and everything to glorify the Lord, and people write songs based on so many different emotions. And so this is the basic tool set that Dr. Mason gave you today, the very basic tool set. And like the more complex that your chords or harmony becomes, the more unique your piece will become, the more even interesting it can become, because you're adding more layers of sound. And it becomes, your toolbox becomes more expressive as you learn more details with all of the with all of the tools that he gave you today. And next week, we're going to be delving into a few more of those more detailed tools, correct, Dr. Mason?
Yes, next week at this same time, I'll be doing a more advanced kind of workshop with some
Okay.
more upper level things. So if you're interested in that, tune in at the same time. And if you're interested at all in taking the intermediate theory course, if you just go to the Saint Andrews Conservatory.org website, you can register for that course, and the dates and so on.
Okay. And that is spelled out, correct? SAINT, not the abbreviation ST. Saint Andrews Conservatory .org. Okay. Well, thank you so much, Dr. Mason, and we appreciate you. And thank you, and look forward to next week. And I hope you all have a good week. And thank you for joining us.
All right. Bye, everybody.
Thank you. Bye-bye.